The shuttle touched down on the glass plains of Varkesh, the capital world of the Varix Empire. Everything shimmered under two suns, the air, the sand, even the shadows. To most humans, this planet looked like a dream carved from crystal. But for Corporal Daniel Reeve, it felt like walking into the heart of a legend. He wasn't a soldier anymore. Not today. He was a messenger, a man carrying a single silver data card with words of peace from the United Earth Council. His mission was simple: deliver the message, speak with the alien queen, and return home. No politics, no weapons, no lies. He kept reminding himself of that as his boots crunched softly on the shining ground. His escort, two towering Varix guards, didn't speak. Their eyes glowed faint blue behind their silver masks. They were silent, disciplined, and a little terrifying. Daniel had heard stories about the Varix, tall insectoid beings with carapaces like gold and eyes like liquid gems, a species born for war, ruled by a queen whose voice could command entire fleets. Yet here he was, a single human, walking through their glowing halls like a tiny spark among suns. As he approached the palace, he saw it, a massive structure of light and crystal, rising high into the air. It wasn't built, it grew, alive and breathing with color. The walls seemed to hum softly, as if the palace itself was aware of his presence. When the doors opened, Daniel had to squint. The throne room was enormous, filled with golden light. Tall Varix nobles stood in silence, their long limbs folded neatly. And at the center, upon a throne made of shifting glass, sat Queen Zalara. She was beautiful in a way that defied human understanding. Her body shimmered like molten sunlight, and her eyes, deep and radiant, watched him with calm curiosity. Her voice, when she spoke, was soft but powerful, echoing through every corner of the hall. "So, this is the human messenger," she said. Her words carried both wonder and amusement. Daniel bowed awkwardly. "Yes, Your Majesty. I bring greetings and peace from Earth." The queen tilted her head slightly, studying him like a scientist studying a new life form. "One man," she murmured. "Your species sends only one?" Daniel smiled faintly. "Sometimes one voice is enough." A quiet ripple of sound passed through the nobles. A strange clicking Daniel guessed was their version of laughter. But the queen didn't laugh. She leaned forward, her golden armor catching the light. "Tell me, human," she said, "why do your people seek peace with those they once feared?" Daniel hesitated. "Because fear wastes life. Because we've seen enough death. And because we believe peace isn't weakness. It's courage." For a moment, the queen said nothing. The silence stretched long enough that Daniel could hear his own heartbeat. Then slowly she rose from her throne. Her full height was almost twice his. Yet when she stepped closer, her movements were graceful, not threatening. She circled him once, her long cloak trailing like a beam of sunlight. "Your words are strange," she said quietly. "You speak of peace as if it were sacred." "To us," Daniel replied, "it is." Her eyes met his again, bright, searching, alive. For a brief second, Daniel felt like she could see straight through him. His fears, his doubts, his hope. Something unspoken passed between them. A spark of understanding. Small but real. "Perhaps," she said at last, "the humans are not what we believed." She returned to her throne, the golden light softening around her. "You may rest here for the night, messenger. Tomorrow we will speak again." Daniel nodded, relieved, though his heart still raced. He bowed and turned to follow the guards, but her voice stopped him once more. "Human," she called. "What is your name?" He looked back. "Daniel. Daniel Reeve." "Daniel," she repeated slowly, tasting the word as if it were foreign and fascinating. "Very well. Sleep peacefully, Daniel Reeve of Earth." As he walked out, the queen's eyes followed him. Not with suspicion, but with curiosity. In that single meeting, something had changed. He didn't know it yet, but the queen of the Varix, a ruler feared across galaxies, had found something new in the quiet courage of a human messenger. And from that moment onward, she would never forget him. The next morning, Daniel Reeve woke to a soft golden light shining through the walls. On Varkesh, even the air glowed. The room he was given was far grander than anything he had ever seen. Walls of transparent stone, a floor that felt alive under his boots, and a ceiling that showed the endless stars above. He had expected guards outside his door, but there were none. Only silence and the faint sound of music somewhere far in the palace. He couldn't tell where it came from. It felt like the palace itself was humming a song. After a few moments, a smaller Varix entered the room, bowing slightly. "The Queen requests your presence, human Daniel," it said in a voice that sounded like wind passing through glass. Daniel followed. The corridors were long and glowing, filled with strange flowers that floated in the air like little suns. He felt small in such beauty, a creature of flesh and bone walking through a world made of light. When he entered the throne hall again, it was empty except for her. Queen Zalara sat quietly, her long hands resting on her knees, her eyes half closed. She didn't wear her crown today, only a thin veil of golden silk that shimmered with every breath she took. "Good morning, Daniel Reeve," she said softly. "You slept well?" Daniel bowed slightly. "Yes, Your Majesty. Your world is beautiful. It's like walking inside a dream." Her eyes glowed faintly. "And dreams in your kind, are they real?" He blinked, surprised by the question. "Dreams? They're pictures in our minds. Hopes, memories. Sometimes they show us what we want, sometimes what we fear." The Queen tilted her head thoughtfully. "Strange. My kind does not dream. When we close our eyes, there is only silence." There was sadness in her voice, something quiet and heavy. Daniel looked at her carefully. Beneath her golden shell and power, there was loneliness, and deep and old. She asked more questions then, not about politics or war, but about humans. "What is music to your kind? Why do humans laugh when they are sad? Why do you risk your lives to save strangers?" At first, Daniel tried to answer carefully, like a diplomat. But soon he spoke with his heart. He told her about his home, about the smell of rain on old stone, about the laughter of children running through city streets, about the feeling of holding someone's hand when the world feels too big. Zalara listened without interruption. Her eyes softened as he spoke. She didn't move, didn't blink, as if afraid that even a small sound might break his words. Finally, she said quietly, "You speak of your world as if it is alive." "It is," Daniel said, "and so are the people in it. Even in pain, even in loss, and we keep living, we keep hoping." The Queen looked down at her hands. "On my world, we do not hope. We obey, we rule, we serve. There is no space for hope." Her words lingered in the air. Daniel felt a strange ache in his chest. "Then maybe that's why your people fight so much," he said softly. "Hope gives us something to live for." She turned her gaze toward him again. Her golden eyes shimmered like a dying star. "You speak as if hope is something you can hold." Daniel smiled faintly. "Sometimes it's something you hold inside." For a long moment they stood in silence. The distance between them, between human and alien, between peace and power, began to feel smaller. When the Queen finally spoke again, her voice was different, softer, warmer. "Tell me, Daniel Reeve of Earth, why did you come yourself? You are no diplomat," he hesitated. "Because someone had to try. Someone had to show that humans aren't just fighters. We can talk, we can listen." Her eyes glowed brighter. "And if I were to listen forever?" Daniel blinked. "Forever?" The Queen rose slowly from her throne. Her light filled the hall, golden and warm. "Perhaps there is more to learn from one human than from all the armies of your world." Daniel didn't know what she meant, but her tone made his heart beat faster. There was something in her eyes now. Curiosity mixed with something gentler, something almost human. That night, as Daniel returned to his quarters, he couldn't sleep. He replayed every word, every look, every question. The Queen wasn't like any leader he'd ever met. She wasn't only powerful, she was searching. And somewhere deep inside, Daniel realized he wanted to see her again, not because of duty, but because he wanted to understand her. He had come to deliver peace. But something else had begun, something fragile, quiet, and far more dangerous than war. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into quiet months on the shining world of Varkesh. Daniel Reeve was no longer treated like a stranger. The guards bowed when he passed. The servants brought him food before he asked, and the Golden Palace had opened its doors to him. Yet the more comfort he was given, the more he began to feel something strange. He was being kept. At first, he didn't notice. The Queen would summon him every evening, and their talk stretched for hours. Sometimes they sat in silence beside the great windows of the throne room, watching twin suns melt into the horizon. Other times she asked endless questions about human life, about love, laughter, pain, and death. She seemed fascinated by the smallness of human things. How one planet could hold so many emotions. How fragile bodies could carry so much courage. She watched Daniel with a quiet hunger for understanding, as if through him she could see the soul of his entire race. But one night, as he spoke of his home, of oceans that sang against the shore and rain that fell like silver threads, the Queen interrupted softly. "You speak of your world as if you miss it." Daniel smiled faintly. "Of course I do. It's my home." There was a pause. The Queen's golden eyes dimmed. "You have been here for many cycles," she said quietly, "and yet your heart still belongs to a world far away." "That's how humans are," Daniel said. "We carry our home inside us." She looked away, and something in her expression changed, something deep and unreadable. When Daniel left that night, he felt uneasy, though he didn't understand why. The next morning, when he asked for permission to send a message to Earth, the guards looked at each other and stayed silent. Hours later, a court advisor came to him and said coldly, "Her Majesty has decided communication will resume after further council meetings." Daniel frowned. "After? How long will that be?" The advisor bowed his head slightly. "Time moves differently here, human. Be patient." That was the moment he realized he was not free. He tried again the next day, but the same answer came. The days began to stretch, slow and golden, but heavy with invisible walls. Every path led him back to the same places. His room, the gardens, the throne hall. Always guarded, always watched. When he finally stood before Queen Zalara again, he couldn't hold his silence any longer. "Your Majesty," he said, his voice shaking slightly. "You have been kind to me, but I must return to my people. My duty is finished." The Queen stared at him for a long time. The hall grew so quiet he could hear his own heartbeat. "Leave," she repeated softly. Her tone wasn't angry but wounded, like the word itself had hurt her. "You wish to abandon our talks?" "It's not abandonment," Daniel said gently. "It's my duty. My home is waiting." The Queen rose from her throne. Her tall form cast a long shadow that shimmered on the golden floor. "You are valuable, Daniel Reeve. You speak with truth and kindness. You make me think." He stepped back. "That's all I ever wanted, Your Majesty. To help both our worlds understand each other." Her glowing eyes flickered. "Then understand this," she said, her voice lowering to something like thunder and sorrow. "If you leave, you take with you the only light this throne has ever known." Daniel's chest tightened. "Your Majesty, you can't mean—" "I do." She turned her head slightly. Two guards stepped from the shadows, their eyes cold and unblinking. "For your own safety," she continued, "you will remain in the palace until I decide otherwise." He stared at her in disbelief. "For my safety? Or for your loneliness?" Her golden face trembled just slightly. "You do not understand what it means to rule," she whispered. "Here, peace is made of silence. I have lived in silence for too long." The guards took a step forward, and Daniel felt the air grow heavy. He wanted to shout, to argue, but one look at her stopped him. She wasn't cruel. She was afraid. Afraid to lose the only person who spoke to her like she was more than a queen, like she was alive. That night, Daniel stood by the window of his room, watching the stars. The same stars he had once seen from Earth. He pressed a hand against the glass and whispered, "So this is what peace costs." Far away in the throne room, Queen Zalara sat alone, her crown dimmed, her hands trembling slightly. The palace was silent once again, but it was not the peaceful kind of silence. It was the silence of regret. She had all the power in the galaxy, yet she couldn't command the one thing she truly wanted, the heart of a human. The days after his imprisonment passed slowly, too slowly for Daniel Reeve. The golden halls that once felt full of wonder now felt like walls closing around him. The beauty of Varkesh had turned cold. Every reflection of light reminded him that he was not free. He still had his room, his meals, and his comfort. But freedom, that invisible breath of life, was gone. The guards outside his door were polite but silent. When he spoke to them, they didn't answer. They didn't need to. Their presence was the Queen's command. At first, Daniel tried to reason. He sent requests to speak with her, to plead for his release, to explain that peace was never meant to be a prison. But every message returned with the same words. Her Majesty is not receiving visitors. It hurt him. Not because he was trapped, but because she was avoiding him, the very woman who once asked about his dreams, his people, his heart. The days stretched into weeks. Daniel began to lose track of time. The two suns outside his window rose and fell endlessly, but everything inside stayed the same. The same meals, the same silence, the same golden glow. Sometimes he would talk to himself, not to stay sane, but to remind himself that he was still human. "You're going home, Daniel," he would whisper. "You'll see the blue sky again. You'll feel the rain again." But deep down he wasn't sure he believed it anymore. Then one night when the palace was asleep, he heard a soft knock on his door. He froze. The guards never knocked. Slowly the door slid open, and there she stood. Queen Zalara. She wasn't wearing her crown or her golden robe. Her armor was gone. For the first time, Daniel saw her without the mask of royalty. She looked smaller, softer, tired. "Your Majesty," he said quietly, unsure if he was dreaming. Her glowing eyes met his. "Do not call me that," she whispered. "Not tonight." Daniel stood still, confused. She stepped into the room, the door closing behind her with a faint hum. For a long time, neither spoke. The only sound was the soft pulse of the palace walls, alive and breathing around them. Finally, she said, "You hate me now." Daniel sighed. "I don't hate you, but I don't understand you." She looked down. "I fear that if you leave, you will take something I cannot replace." He frowned. "And what is that?" Her voice trembled, the first time he had ever heard it shake. "Your presence, your words, you make me see my world differently. When you speak of hope, I feel it. When you speak of home, I almost remember what warmth means. I did not want that to end." Daniel's heart ached. He had seen leaders drunk with power, but this was different. Zalara wasn't clinging to him because of control. She was clinging to feeling. He took a slow breath. "Zalara, you can't keep me because you're afraid to lose what I represent." "That's not peace. That's loneliness dressed as love." Her eyes flickered. "Loneliness," she repeated softly. "You think a queen can feel such a thing?" "I think everyone can," Daniel said. "Even gods, even rulers." For a moment she said nothing. Then she stepped closer, her golden light reflecting in his eyes. "You humans," she murmured. "So fragile, yet so brave. You break so easily, yet you still give your hearts away." Daniel swallowed hard. "That's what makes us human." They stood in silence again, caught between fear and understanding. The air between them felt heavy, full of words neither dared to say. Finally, the queen turned away. "You may hate me for what I've done," she said quietly, "but I will not undo it." "I cannot." "Why?" Daniel asked softly. "Why not let me go?" She looked back at him with eyes that glowed like dying embers. "Because when you leave, I will be alone again, and I do not know how to bear that." Daniel wanted to speak, to tell her that loneliness was something everyone had to face, but the words stuck in his throat. He saw in her the same pain he had seen in soldiers who had lost everything. She was a queen surrounded by thousands, yet utterly alone. When she left, the room felt emptier than before. The door closed softly and the silence returned, deeper, heavier, and far more painful. Daniel sat on the edge of his bed, his hands trembling. He finally understood her, and it broke his heart. She wasn't his captor anymore. She was a soul chained by her own crown. He looked at the stars outside, whispering, "If you can hear me, Earth, I haven't forgotten who I am, but I think she's forgotten who she is." And far away in the throne room, Queen Zalara sat in darkness, her golden light fading. For the first time in her reign, tears fell from her eyes, and clear, glowing drops that vanished before they touched the ground. The Queen of Varkesh wept, not for her prisoner, but for the part of herself she had lost trying to keep him. The Golden Palace was quiet that morning. Too quiet. Even the air felt heavy, as if the world itself was holding its breath. Daniel Reeves stood by the tall glass window, staring out at the endless sky of Varkesh. The two suns rose together, their light painting the land in gold. But to him it looked like a cage made of sunlight. He had tried everything. He had begged, reasoned, and argued. He had even stopped eating for a day, hoping someone would notice. But the Queen's guards stood firm, obeying their silent orders. No one dared to defy her. Daniel's hope was fading. The thought of never seeing Earth again, never hearing the sound of rain, never smelling the ocean, never feeling the wind on his skin, felt like slow poison in his chest. But one evening, a faint whisper of hope returned. A young Varex engineer entered his room quietly. The creature was smaller than the others, with silver patterns running across its skin. Its voice was soft, trembling. "Human Daniel," it said, "you spoke once about freedom. Do you still believe in it?" Daniel turned sharply. More than anything, the engineer looked around nervously before continuing. "Then listen. There is a ship, an old one, used for royal supply runs. It leaves at dawn tomorrow. If you reach the lower docks before the sun's rise, you can escape." Daniel's heart pounded. "Why are you helping me?" The small Varex lowered its head. "Because you changed our queen. You made her feel. But feelings should never come from chains. Go, before she changes her mind again." Before Daniel could thank it, the Varex was gone. That night, Daniel didn't sleep. He sat by the window, staring at the stars, thinking of Earth. He thought of his mother's garden, his father's old books, and the laughter of people in the streets. Every memory felt sharper, brighter, like a promise he had to keep. When dawn came, he dressed quietly and took the silver data card, the same one that had brought him here. The message of peace, the mission of words, it was all still in his pocket. But now that peace came with a cost he could never forget. He slipped through the corridors like a shadow. The palace seemed asleep. Only the distant hum of alien machines echoed through the halls. His heart raced faster with every step. He reached the lower docks just as the first light of dawn spilled across the sky. The old transport ship sat waiting, its engines cold, its hull covered in dust. Freedom was only a few steps away. Then he heard her voice. Leaving without saying farewell, Daniel Reeve. He froze. The voice was calm, but filled with sorrow. He turned slowly, and there she was, Queen Zalara. No guards, no crown, no armor, just her, radiant, fragile, and heartbreakingly alone. Daniel's throat tightened. "I didn't want to hurt you," he said softly, "but I can't stay here." Her golden eyes flickered like fire. "You think I keep you here for cruelty?" she whispered. "You think I do not feel the weight of your sadness?" "I think you're afraid," he said. "Afraid to be alone again." Her body trembled slightly. "I have ruled for centuries. I have known war, betrayal, silence. But never have I known what it means to miss someone. Until you came." His heart ached. "Then you understand why I have to go." She stepped closer, her light surrounding him. "When you speak," she said softly, "the halls feel alive. When you are silent, everything turns cold. If you go, this palace will become nothing more than stone." Daniel swallowed. "Then don't let it. Let it live. Let your people fill it with life, not me." For a long moment she said nothing. Her eyes glistened with a light he had never seen before, sadness mixed with something almost human. "Humans," she whispered. "You come with small hearts, yet you leave wounds as deep as galaxies." Daniel took a step forward. "And you taught me that even power can be lonely. But keeping me here won't fix that. It'll only break us both." The queen turned away. Her golden wings unfolded slightly, trembling. "If I let you go, will you forget me?" Daniel's voice broke as he answered, "No, I couldn't even if I tried." For a moment, the only sound was the wind through the glass towers. Then, with a slow and painful motion, Queen Zalara lifted one hand. The guards appeared from the shadows but didn't move. Her voice was soft, but final. "Go, Daniel Reeve. Take your peace with you. Take your light away from my darkness." He looked at her one last time. "Thank you," he whispered. As he stepped onto the ship, he turned back. The queen stood in the morning light, tall, proud, and completely still. She didn't move, didn't speak, didn't chase him. But the look in her eyes said everything. It wasn't anger, it was heartbreak. The engines came to life, rumbling softly. As the ship rose into the golden sky, Daniel saw her figure shrinking. Below, a lonely queen watching her only friend vanish into the stars. And though he was finally free, Daniel felt a pain in his chest that freedom could not heal. Because sometimes, leaving isn't victory. It's love. Letting go. The stars stretched endlessly before him, cold and quiet. Daniel sat alone in the small transport ship, his eyes fixed on the glowing blue trail that faded behind him, the path that led away from Varkesh, away from her. The hum of the ship's engines was steady, but his heart was not. Each second that passed felt heavier than the last. He had escaped. He was free. But freedom, he realized, didn't feel like victory. It felt like loss. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the small silver data card, the one that had started it all. The message of peace, the mission that had brought him across the stars. He stared at it in silence. The mission was done. The treaty was signed. The words had been spoken. Yet somehow, it all felt meaningless now. His mind kept drifting back to her face, the golden light in her eyes when she had said his name, the trembling in her voice when she told him to go. He could still hear it, echoing through his thoughts like a melody he couldn't forget. Take your light away from my darkness. He closed his eyes and leaned his head against the cold wall of the ship. He didn't realize when the first tear slipped down his cheek. For hours he floated through the void, surrounded by stars that shimmered like distant memories. He should have been thinking about Earth, about home, about what came next. But all he could think of was her, the queen who had every power in the galaxy yet couldn't stop a human heart from leaving. As he neared the edge of Varkesh space, the ship's console beeped softly. A faint transmission was coming through. He frowned and pressed the receiver. The voice that came through made his heart stop. Daniel. It was her. Queen Zalara. Her voice was faint, almost breaking. You are beyond my reach now, she said softly. But I wish to speak once more. I wish to understand. Why do humans hurt so much when they love? Daniel swallowed hard. He could barely speak. Because love is not about having someone, he whispered. It's about caring even when you can't. Silence filled the line. Then she spoke again, her tone quieter, almost fragile. You carry sorrow like a weapon, and yet it makes you beautiful. He tried to smile, but it came out broken. And you carry power like a crown, he said softly, but it hides your pain. Her voice trembled. Daniel Reeve. I could destroy worlds. I could command armies. But I could not make you stay. Daniel closed his eyes, feeling his heart twist. That's because love isn't about control, Zalara. It's about choice. For a moment, neither spoke. The static of the transmission filled the air like soft rain. Then she said, Then I choose to let you go. His chest tightened. And I choose to never forget you. The transmission ended. The console light went dark, leaving him alone once again. But somehow that silence was different now. It wasn't emptiness. It was acceptance. He sat there for a long time, staring at the stars. And then, slowly, he took a deep breath and whispered to himself, You did it, Daniel. You made peace, even if it broke your heart. He looked at Earth's distant coordinates on the screen. He could return. He could see his family again, walk the streets, feel the air of home. But something inside him hesitated. He thought of the people of Varkesh, the engineers, the guards, the queen. He thought of the change his presence had sparked. For the first time in generations, the queen had felt something human, something real. That meant something. That meant his mission wasn't just words, it was connection. As he sat in the cockpit, he looked at the data card one last time. The message he had carried wasn't just for peace between species. It was a message about understanding. About how fragile hearts, no matter their shape or world, all beat for the same reason. He smiled faintly. Maybe. That's what being human means. Then he activated the ship's recorder. His voice filled the small cabin, calm, steady, but soft with emotion. "This is Daniel Reeve, messenger of Earth," he began. "To whoever hears this, peace is not a treaty or a promise. It's a bridge. And sometimes the ones who build it never get to cross it." He ended the recording and sent it into the void, a small light drifting between the stars. A message not of command but of compassion. As the ship sped toward Earth, Daniel leaned back and watched the stars blur into silver lines. The pain in his heart was still there, but it had changed. It wasn't a wound anymore. It was a memory. Bright, warm, and alive. He whispered one last time, so softly that even the ship couldn't hear it. "Goodbye, Zalara." And though she was light years away, somewhere in the golden palace of Varkesh, the alien queen paused on her throne. She looked toward the stars, eyes glistening. And in that silent moment across the emptiness of space, she whispered back, "Goodbye, my human." Months passed. The ship that carried Daniel Reeve finally reached the blue world he once called home. Earth, bright, alive, and familiar. Yet when he stepped onto its soil again, it didn't feel the same. The people welcomed him as a hero. They called him the man who spoke for humanity. His name spread across news screens and history books. But behind every smile he gave, there was a silence, the kind that belonged to memories too deep to share. He was home, but part of him was still light years away. Every night he stood on the balcony of his small apartment staring at the stars. Among them was one faint golden spark, the sun of Varkesh. No one else could tell which one it was, but Daniel knew. He always knew. Sometimes he imagined her voice in the wind. Sometimes he swore he could feel that strange warmth, like the glow of her wings brushing against his soul. But life went on. He worked again with the diplomatic council, guiding new missions between human and alien worlds. Yet he never spoke much about his time with the Queen. When people asked, he only said, "She taught me more about being human than any human ever could." One night, while reviewing messages from the outer colonies, his console beeped. A signal, unknown source, weak, ancient encryption. Daniel's breath caught. He leaned closer, his fingers trembling as he opened it. It was her voice, soft, distant, but unmistakable. "Daniel Reeve," she whispered through the static. "If this reaches you, then time has already stolen many sons from us. My empire has changed. My people now know peace, true peace. And it began with you." He froze, his heart pounding. "I have learned what love means." Her voice continued. "It is not command. It is not power. It is remembering someone every time the stars rise." Daniel couldn't stop the tears that filled his eyes. He pressed his hand to the screen as if he could touch her through it. "I once thought immortality was strength," she said softly. "But now I know. It is memory that lives forever. And in my memory you are still here. You always will be." The message ended with a faint pulse of golden light, her royal insignia. It faded slowly, leaving only darkness on the screen. For a long time, Daniel just sat there in silence. The city lights outside flickered. The wind carried the sound of distant traffic, but all he could hear was her voice. He smiled weakly. "Still ruling my heart, aren't you?" he whispered. That night, he couldn't sleep. He went for a walk. By the ocean, the same sea he used to dream about when he was lost among the stars. The waves rolled against the shore, glowing softly under the moonlight. He looked up at the sky again. Somewhere beyond those endless stars was a queen, not the cold, commanding ruler he had first met, but the woman who had learned to feel. He wondered if she was looking at the same stars too. As the wind brushed his face, he reached into his pocket and pulled out the silver data card, old and scratched now. He smiled sadly. This tiny piece of metal had carried a message of peace once. It had carried him to her. and in the end, it had carried his heart back home. He placed the data card gently into the sand, letting the tide pull it toward the sea. "Let it travel," he whispered. "Let it find her again." The waves carried it away, small and silent, until it disappeared beneath the dark water. Daniel stayed there until dawn. The sun rose slowly, painting the sky with gold, almost the same color as her eyes. He smiled, feeling warmth spread through him. Somewhere, across the galaxies, Queen Zalara stood on her palace balcony, looking up at her twin sons. In her hand, she held a small object, a weathered silver data card. The sea of stars had brought it back to her world after so many years. She closed her eyes, pressing it to her chest. "You kept your promise," she whispered. "You never forgot." And for the first time in centuries, the Queen of Varkesh smiled. Not as a ruler, not as a goddess, but as someone who once loved, and was loved in return. Back on Earth, Daniel felt a strange peace inside him. He didn't know why, but the ache in his heart had quieted. Maybe love across all the light years had finally found its way home. He turned from the sea, the wind playing with his hair. A soft smile lingered on his face. He was just a human messenger once, carrying words of peace across the stars. But now he carried something far greater, a love that no distance could erase.